The Sleepover. It all started on a Saturday night at Lily's house. Lily was my best friend, and we'd been inseparable since elementary school. When she suggested a sleepover at her place, I jumped at the chance. It was the weekend before Halloween, and we were ready for some spooky fun. Little did I know, that night would mark the beginning of my worst nightmares that would soon become terrifyingly real. Lily's house was always a blast. We'd stay up late, gossip about school, talk about boys, and eat way too much junk food. But this time, Lily had something different planned. After raiding the kitchen for snacks, she pulled out an old Ouija board from her attic. "Where did you get that?" I asked, a mix of curiosity and unease in my voice. "My aunt gave it to me," Lily said, grinning. "She used to play with it when she was our age. Don't worry, it's just for fun." I wasn't so sure. I'd heard stories about Ouija boards, about people making contact with things they shouldn't have. But Lily was my best friend, and I didn't want to be the one to ruin the mood. So I shrugged and agreed to play. We dimmed the lights, lit a couple of candles, and sat cross-legged on the floor with the board between us. It was just the two of us, our fingers lightly resting on the planchette. We giggled nervously as Lily asked the first question. "Is there anyone here with us?" The planchette didn't move. We waited, but nothing happened. We asked a few more questions, but the board remained still. After a few minutes, we got bored and decided to call it quits. We laughed it off, teasing each other about how we were too chicken to take it seriously. To end the night, we watched Paranormal Activity, the movie that everyone at school had been talking about. It was creepy, sure, but we were more focused on making fun of the cheesy jump scares than being scared ourselves. By the time the movie ended, we were exhausted. We cleaned up, crawled into our sleeping bags, and drifted off to sleep. I thought nothing of it when I left Lily's house the next day. We had a great time, and I was looking forward to the next sleepover. But that Sunday night, everything changed. It was late when I finally fell asleep that night. I was tossing and turning, unable to get comfortable. When I finally did drift off, the dream began. I was standing in the middle of a dark, twisted forest. The trees were tall and gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. A thick fog hung in the air, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. I felt cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. That's when I saw her. She was standing just a few feet away from me, her back turned. She was hunched over, her body wrapped in a tattered black cloak. Her hair was long and matted, cascading down her back in tangled knots. I couldn't see her face, but I could feel her eyes on me, even though she wasn't looking at me. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, helpless as she slowly turned to face me. Her face was pale, almost ghostly white, with deep-set eyes that seemed to pierce through me. Her lips were thin and cracked, pulled back into a twisted smile that sent chills down my spine. "Come here, child," she whispered, her voice raspy and cold. "Come closer." I shook my head. I felt my heart beating, but I couldn't move. It was like she had me under some kind of spell, drawing me toward her against my will. I could feel her bony fingers reaching out, ready to grab me. Then I woke up, drenched in sweat, absolutely terrified. I looked around my room, disoriented, but everything was normal. My posters were on the walls, my desk was cluttered with books and papers, and my phone was buzzing with notifications. It was just a dream, I told myself. just a really bad dream. But that didn't stop the fear from creeping in. I tried to shake it off, telling myself that it was probably because of the movie we watched. I mean, who wouldn't have nightmares after watching something like Paranormal Activity? But as I lay back down and tried to fall asleep again, I couldn't shake the image of that woman's face. The way she looked at me, like she knew something I didn't, like she had plans for me. The next few nights, the nightmares continued. Every time I closed my eyes, I found myself back in that forest, with the witch watching me, waiting for me. Each time, she got a little closer. Her voice got a little louder, and each time, I woke up in a cold sweat, too scared to fall back asleep. But it didn't stop there. A couple of nights later, just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard it. A soft knocking sound. At first, I thought it was coming from outside, maybe a branch tapping against the window. But as I lay there, listening, I realized it was coming from inside the room. It was coming from the walls. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The knocking was faint, but it was definitely there, like someone was gently tapping on the walls from the inside. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, maybe just the house settling. But then I heard it again, louder this time. Knock, knock, knock. It was slow and deliberate, like someone, or something, was trying to get my attention. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it around the room. There was nothing there. No one. But the knocking didn't stop. I tried to wake up my parents, but they just brushed it off as a bad dream. My mom, Erica, came into my room, checked under the bed, and gave me a hug, telling me everything was fine. "It's just your imagination, sweetie," she said. "You've been watching too many scary movies." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the knocking continued, night after night. And it wasn't just the knocking. Sometimes, just as I was about to fall asleep, I would hear a voice, soft, whispery, and cold. It was the same voice from my dreams, the voice of the witch. She would whisper my name, over and over, her voice seeping into my thoughts like poison. "Nellie, Nellie, come to me, child." It was like she was right there, standing next to my bed, her cold breath on my neck. I would jerk awake, my heart pounding, but there was never anyone there. The room would be empty, but the fear would linger, making it impossible to sleep. As the days went by, I became more and more exhausted. I could barely focus at school, and my friends started to notice. Even Lily, who usually brushed off anything remotely spooky, was starting to get worried. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said one morning as we walked to class. "Are you sure you're okay?" I wanted to tell her everything, the nightmares, the knocking, the voice, but I was scared she wouldn't believe me, or worse, that she would think I was losing my mind. So I just shrugged and forced a smile. "I'm fine, just tired. I'll be okay." But I wasn't okay. Every night the nightmares got worse. The witch was no longer content to watch me from a distance. Now she was right there, in my face, her cold, bony hands reaching out to touch me. Her voice was louder, more insistent, demanding that I come to her. And the knocking. It was everywhere. Not just in my room, but in the hallway, in the kitchen, even in the bathroom. It was like she was following me, taunting me, never letting me escape her. I tried everything to make it stop. I kept the lights on all night, played music to drown out the knocking, even slept with the TV on, hoping that the noise would keep her away. But nothing worked. She was always there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to let my guard down. One night, I finally broke down. The knocking had been going on for hours, louder than ever, and the voice was relentless, whispering my name over and over. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran to my parents' room, tears streaming down my face, begging them to believe me. "Please, Mom, Dad, it's real. She's real. She's trying to get me." But they just looked at me with pity in their eyes, like I was a little kid having a nightmare. My dad, Lucas, pulled me into a hug, trying to calm me down. "Nellie, honey, you're just stressed out. It's all in your head. We'll take you to the doctor tomorrow, okay? But for now, you need to try and sleep." I wanted to scream, to shake them, to make them understand that this wasn't just in my head. But I was too exhausted, too broken. I let them guide me back to my room, where they tucked me in like a little child and reassured me everything would be fine. But as they closed the door behind them, I felt more alone than ever. I lay there in the darkness, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. I was too scared to close my eyes, afraid of what I might see if I did. The room felt colder than usual, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Then, as if on cue, the knocking started again. This time, it was more insistent, like someone pounding on the walls. It was coming from everywhere, surrounding me. I pulled the covers up to my chin, trying to block out the sound, but it was no use. It was all I could hear, all I could think about. "Nellie," the voice whispered, cutting through the noise. It was closer now, almost as if it was right beside me. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying that it would go away. But it didn't. The voice grew louder, more forceful. "Nellie, look at me." I couldn't resist. I didn't want to, but it was like she had control over me. Slowly, I opened my eyes and looked around the room. At first, everything seemed normal. But then I saw her, hovering above my bed. The witch from my dreams was there, floating in the air, her face twisted into that same horrifying smile. Her eyes burned into mine, and her bony fingers reached out, inching closer to my face. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to do anything but stare at her in terror. She leaned in closer, her face inches from mine, her breath cold against my skin. "You're mine now, child," she hissed, her voice sending shivers down my spine. "You can't escape me." That's when I lost it. I screamed as loud as I could, thrashing in my bed, trying to get away from her. The door flew open, and my parents rushed in, turning on the lights. But as soon as the light flooded the room, she was gone. "Nellie, what's wrong? What happened?" my mum asked, her voice filled with concern. I couldn't speak. I was shaking, tears streaming down my face. I just pointed to where the witch had been, but there was nothing there now. My dad checked the room, even looked under the bed and in the closet, but found nothing. "Sweetheart, there's nothing here," he said softly. "You just had a bad dream. It's okay." But it wasn't okay. I knew what I had seen, what I had felt. She was real, and she was coming for me. But no one believed me. Not my parents, not my friends, no one. The days that followed were a blur of fear and exhaustion. I could barely function, constantly on edge, waiting for the next encounter. The knocking continued, as did the voice, but I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself it wasn't real. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before she came back. It happened on a Friday night. I was in my room, trying to do some homework, but my mind kept wandering, thinking about her. I hadn't had a good night's sleep in weeks, and it was starting to take its toll. As I sat at my desk, I felt a sudden chill in the room. The temperature dropped, and the air grew thick, suffocating. I knew she was coming. I could feel her presence, that same oppressive energy that made it hard to breathe. The knocking started again, louder than ever, reverberating through the walls. I covered my ears, trying to block it out, but it was no use. The sound was inside my head, rattling around like a bell. "Nellie." The voice was there, louder, clearer, as if she was standing right behind me. I didn't want to turn around, but I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, I looked over my shoulder. She was there, hovering in the corner of the room, her twisted smile wider than ever. This time there was no escaping her. She drifted toward me, her eyes locked on mine, her bony fingers outstretched. "You can't hide from me," she whispered, her voice like nails on a chalkboard. "You're mine now." I screamed and ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. I pounded on it, begging for my parents to hear me, but the knocking drowned out my cries. She was getting closer, and there was nowhere to go. In a last-ditch effort, I ran to my bed and grabbed the covers, pulling them over me like a shield. I knew it wouldn't protect me, but it was all I had. I curled up in a ball, sobbing, waiting for her to take me. But then the knocking stopped. The air grew warm again, and the oppressive energy lifted. I slowly pulled the covers down, peeking out to see if she was still there. She was gone. I didn't move for what felt like hours, too scared to leave the safety of my bed. But eventually, exhaustion took over, and I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When I woke up the next morning, everything felt different. The room was brighter, the air lighter. It was like she had never been there. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like I had won, like I had somehow banished her. But even now, as I write this, I can't shake the feeling that she's still out there. I haven't heard the knocking since that night, and the voice has gone silent. But sometimes, when I'm alone in my room, I catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow that moves just a little too fast, and I wonder, did I really get rid of her? Or is she just waiting for the right moment to come back and claim me once and for all? All I know is that I'll never touch a Ouija board again. Some things are better left alone, and some nightmares are all too real. The door we shouldn't have opened. I never believed in ghosts. Growing up, I always thought ghost stories were just that, stories. Fictional tales made up to scare kids or keep them entertained around a campfire. My best friend, Abby, on the other hand, was obsessed with the paranormal. She loved everything about it. The movies, the books, the podcasts. So when she suggested we try using a Ouija board one Friday night, I laughed it off. "Come on, Rose," Abby said, her eyes twinkling with excitement. "It'll be fun. Besides, it's not like anything's going to happen." It was the first weekend of summer break, and we were both looking for something to do. Our town was small, the kind of place where nothing much ever happened. Most of our classmates had left for vacation, leaving the streets unusually quiet. My parents were away on a trip, and Abby was spending the weekend at my place to keep me company. We had the house to ourselves and no real plans, so, against my better judgment, I agreed. "All right," I said, rolling my eyes but smiling. "But if nothing happens, you owe me a movie night." "Deal," Abby grinned, already rummaging through her backpack. You're going to love this." She pulled out a dusty old Ouija board, the kind you'd expect to see in a horror movie. The letters and numbers were faded, and the wood looked worn, like it had been used 1,000 times before. "Where did you get that?" I asked, suddenly feeling a bit uneasy. "My cousin found it at a flea market," Abby said, brushing off my concern. She thought it was cool, but she never used it. Said it gave her the creeps. "Great," I muttered. "Just what we need." We set up the board in the living room, dimming the lights to add to the atmosphere. Abby was giddy with excitement, while I tried to act nonchalant, though I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in my stomach. We both placed our fingers on the planchette, and Abby took a deep breath. "Is there anyone here with us?" she asked softly. At first, nothing happened. The planchette remained still, and I started to relax, thinking this was all just a silly game. But then, ever so slowly, the planchette began to move. "Did you do that?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "No," Abby said, her eyes wide. "I swear I didn't." The planchette moved to yes, and we both stared at it, stunned. I wanted to pull my hand away, to stop playing, but I couldn't. Something about the movement felt deliberate, like it wasn't us controlling it. "What's your name?" Abby asked, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. The planchette moved again, spelling out the letters D-A-N-A. "Dana?" Abby repeated, glancing at me. "Is that your name?" The planchette moved to Y-E-S again. "How did you die?" I blurted out, not even thinking. It was a question that popped into my head, and before I knew it, I had asked it. The planchette didn't move for a moment, and I thought maybe we'd lost whatever connection we had. But then it started to move again, slower this time, spelling out the word M-U-R-D-E-R. Abby gasped, and I felt my heart skip a beat. This was supposed to be fun, just a silly game. But now it was starting to feel real, too real. "Who did it?" Abby asked, her voice barely a whisper. The planchette didn't move. We waited, but it just sat there, as if whatever was communicating with us didn't want to answer that question. Or maybe it couldn't. After a few minutes of silence, Abby sighed and pulled her hand away. "Maybe we should stop," she said, her voice wavering. I nodded, relief washing over me. "Yeah, I think we've had enough." We packed up the board and tried to shake off the weirdness of what had just happened. We spent the rest of the night watching movies and eating pizza, trying to get back to our usual selves. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about Dana. Who was she? And why did she say she was murdered? I brushed it off as just a freaky coincidence, maybe our subconscious minds playing tricks on us. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The first sign that something was wrong came the following night. After Abby had gone home, I was alone in the house. My parents were still away, and I had the place to myself. Normally, I loved having the house to myself. It was peaceful, quiet. But that night, the silence felt oppressive, like the walls were closing in on me. I tried to distract myself by watching TV, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was irrational, I knew, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every shadow seemed to move on its own. Then as I was getting ready for bed, I heard it. A faint whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind, or maybe just my imagination. But as I stood there, frozen, the whisper came again, clearer this time. "Rose." My blood ran cold. It was a woman's voice, soft but insistent. I spun around looking for the source, but there was no one there. The room was empty. Rose. The voice was coming from the hallway. My legs felt like they were made of lead as I forced myself to move, to step out into the hallway and see what was making that noise. But when I got there, the hallway was empty too. I was shaking, my heart pounding hard. I ran back to my room, slamming the door shut behind me. I crawled into bed and pulled the covers up to my chin, trying to convince myself that it was just my imagination. But as I lay there in the dark, I heard the whisper again, this time closer, right outside my door. Rose. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone and called Abby, my hands trembling as I dialed her number. Abby, something's wrong, I whispered as soon as she picked up. I keep hearing this voice. What voice? Abby asked, her voice sleepy but concerned. I don't know. It's a woman's voice, and she keeps saying my name. Are you sure you're not just tired? Maybe it's just your mind playing tricks on you. I don't know. Maybe... I didn't want to sound crazy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Just try to get some sleep, okay? We'll talk about it in the morning. Yeah, okay, I said, but I didn't believe it. I hung up and tried to calm myself down, telling myself that it was just my imagination. But as I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, I couldn't stop thinking about Dana, the name the Ouija board had spelled out. And that's when I heard it again, this time right in my ear. Rose! I screamed, bolting upright in bed, my heart racing. But when I looked around, the room was empty. The voice was gone. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next few days were a blur of fear and exhaustion. The whispering continued, always in the dead of night, always calling my name. It was relentless, and it was driving me to the edge. I started seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye, flickering at the edges of my vision. I would turn to look, but there would be nothing there. My parents returned from their trip, and I tried to act normal, to pretend that everything was fine. But it was hard to hide the dark circles under my eyes, the constant feeling of dread that hung over me like a cloud. Rose, are you okay? My mom asked one morning, her brow furrowed with concern. You've been awfully quiet lately. I'm fine, I lied, forcing a smile. Just tired. I haven't been sleeping well. She didn't look convinced, but she let it go, probably thinking it was just typical teenage moodiness. But it was so much more than that. One night, as I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, I felt something tugging on my blanket. At first, I thought it was just me shifting in bed, but then it happened again, more forcefully. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The blanket was being pulled down, inch by inch, as if someone, or something, was trying to pull it off me. I clung to it, my knuckles white, but the force was too strong. The blanket was ripped from my hands and thrown to the floor. I screamed, bolting out of bed and running to the light switch. I flicked it on, flooding the room with light, but there was nothing there. The room was empty, the blanket lying crumpled on the floor. My parents came rushing in, their faces filled with concern. Rose, what happened? My dad asked, his voice laced with worry. I don't know, I stammered, trying to find the words to explain what had just happened. Something pulled the blanket off me. My mom looked at me, then at the blanket on the floor. Are you sure you didn't just kick it off in your sleep? She asked gently, though her eyes were filled with doubt. No, I'm sure, I insisted, It was like someone was pulling it away from me. I felt it. My dad sighed and walked over to the bed, picking up the blanket and handing it back to me. "Maybe it was just a bad dream, sweetheart. You've been stressed lately. It could be your mind playing tricks on you." I wanted to argue, to tell them that this wasn't just in my head, but the exhaustion and fear were overwhelming. I was too tired to fight, too scared to even think clearly. "Maybe," I murmured, taking the blanket from him and wrapping it around myself like a shield. "Do you want us to stay with you for a while?" my mum asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. I shook my head. "No, I'll be okay. I just need to sleep." They hesitated, exchanging worried glances, but eventually they nodded and left the room, turning off the light as they went. "Good night, Rose. We're just down the hall if you need us," my dad said softly before closing the door. As soon as they were gone, the room felt colder, darker, and the sense of dread returned with full force. I crawled back into bed, pulling the blanket tightly around me, and tried to calm my racing heart. But sleep didn't come easily. I lay there, eyes wide open, listening to the silence, waiting for something to happen. Hours passed, and just as I was starting to drift off, I heard it again. The whisper. "Rose!" I bolted upright, clutching the blanket to my chest, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The voice was back, closer than ever, and I knew deep down that it wasn't just in my head. This time, I didn't stay in bed. I leaped up and ran to the door, throwing it open and sprinting down the hallway to my parents' room. I banged on the door, barely able to form words through my panic. My dad opened the door, his face etched with concern. "Rose, what is it?" "It's back," I gasped, tears streaming down my face. "The voice is calling me. I can't stay in that room." My parents didn't question me this time. They led me into their room, letting me sleep in the middle of their bed like I was a little kid again. I finally felt safe, the warmth of their presence comforting me as I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Abby came over. I hadn't told her about the things I'd been experiencing since the night we used the Ouija board, but now I needed to talk to someone who might understand. As soon as she walked in, she noticed how shaken I was. "Rose, what's going on? You look terrible." I didn't even know where to start. "It's the board, Abby. Ever since we used it, things have been happening. I keep hearing this voice and it's getting worse. I'm scared, Abby." Abby's face paled. "What kind of things?" I told her everything. The voice, the blanket being pulled off, the cold, oppressive feeling that wouldn't leave me alone. As I spoke, her expression turned from curiosity to fear. "Rose, we need to do something about this," she said, her voice trembling. "We have to get rid of whatever we brought into your house." "But how?" I asked, feeling hopeless. "I don't even know what it is." Abby bit her lip, thinking hard. "Maybe we need to close the door we opened. You know, like in the movies, when they have to end the session properly or something bad stays behind." I hadn't thought of that. "You think that'll work?" "It's worth a try," she said, though she didn't sound convinced. That evening, we sat down with the Ouija board again, this time with a sense of dread rather than excitement. I was terrified of what might happen, but I knew we had to try something. The alternative, living in fear, hearing that voice every night, was unbearable. We placed our fingers on the planchette, and Abby took a deep breath. "Whoever you are, whatever you are, we want to close the door we opened. We want you to leave." At first, nothing happened. I was almost relieved, thinking maybe it was all just in my head. But then the planchette began to move, slowly at first, then with more force. The planchette moved to no, and my heart sank. Abby's hand trembled, but she didn't move it away. "Please, you have to go," she pleaded. "We didn't mean to disturb you." The planchette shot to no again, and I felt the temperature in the room drop. The lights flickered and the air grew thick, suffocating. The oppressive feeling was back, stronger than ever. Then the planchette moved again, this time spelling out M-I-N-E. I yanked my hand away, panic surging through me. "Abby, I can't do this," I cried, backing away from the board. Abby grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "We have to finish this, Rose. We have to close the door, or it'll never stop." I didn't want to, but I knew she was right. I forced myself to place my fingers back on the planchette, my whole body trembling with fear. "Please," Abby said again, her voice cracking. "We're sorry. We didn't mean to disturb you. Just, please go." The planchette stopped moving, and for a moment everything was still. I held my breath, praying that it was over. But then, with one final surge of energy, the planchette shot to goodbye. The lights flickered again, and the room grew unbearably cold before, just as suddenly, everything returned to normal. The air lightened, the temperature rose, and the oppressive feeling lifted. Abby and I stared at each other, our hearts pounding. Neither of us said a word as we packed up the Ouija board and put it away, this time vowing never to touch it again. The days that followed were tense, but gradually, things returned to normal. The whispering stopped, and the oppressive energy that had filled the house seemed to dissipate. I started sleeping better, and the shadows that had haunted me were gone. Abby and I didn't talk much about what happened. It was too strange, too frightening, and I think we both just wanted to forget about it. But the experience left a mark on me. Terrified that whatever it was will return, I regret agreeing to play with the Ouija board, because it's not a game, it's a portal to something we don't really understand. You've braved the darkness with us. Subscribe and keep the spirits at bay. Until next time, sleep if you dare.